Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Daled, Daf 44 of Masechta Yoma. Daf 44 is like a shtickle, I don't know, it's shtickle technical, I guess you could say. It kind of discusses people being in the beit hamikdash, in the heichal, bein ulam v'lam mizbeach. We'll see distinctions there during the time that the kohen gadol is doing his avoda. That's kind of like going to be a whole chunk of today's daf, like basically like comparing the heichal and the area that's between the ulam and the mizbeach. So some distinctions there. However, let's get started. In the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom of Mem Gimel Amud Beis, v'aksiv v'chol adam lo yeh ba'ol moed. That's a question. Because our Mishnah, right, the Mishnah we just learned at the end of the daf yesterday, said that the kohen gadol, he slaughters the cow, and then he takes the blood and he gives it to another kohen to keep the blood moving, right, to be moving it around so that it doesn't congeal. So the kasha is, how could you have a kohen there with, moving around the blood? I thought the pasuk says, "V'chol adam lo yeh ba'ol moed." I thought nobody's allowed to be in the beit hamikdash while the avoda is going on. So what's going on? So Rav Yehuda Tani shel heichel. So Rav Yehuda says teach shel heichel. What does that mean? It means that our Mishnah had said. What did the Mishnah say? He says Memariz ba'al rovid aravi shebaheichel. That this kohen is going to be moving around the blood on the 4th row of stones, the 4th column of stones on the ground, the 4th row of stones in the heichel. So the assumption was that what that means is that, you walk through the ulam, and now you're in the heichel, and you have a kohen in there who's keeping the blood moving. But I thought nobody's allowed to be in the beit hamikdash. So in the Ohel Moed. So we say no, what it means is that the 4th row from the heichel, meaning you go outside of the ulam, and now you're in the heichel, and you count 4 rows, and then you're there in the azara, but not like in the heichel. And if you think about the Mishkan in the Midbar, so like the Ohel Moed is basically the heichal, what would be in the beit hamikdash, the heichal and the kodesh HaKodashim, right? The kodesh and the kodesh HaKodashim. You went inside, kind of the covered area with the oros elim ha'adam, those troshim, and the Ohel and the urios, all that stuff. So that was really the kodesh and the kodesh HaKodashim, right? So when we say b'chol adam lo yeh ba'ol moed, so that's essentially in the beit hamikdash referring to the heichal and the kodesh HaKodashim. So as long as the kohen who's moving around the blood is outside of the heichal, so then it would be okay. It wouldn't be a violation of b'chol adam lo yeh ba'ol moed at the time that the kohen gadol is doing the avoda. Tanu Rabbanan the Rabbi Stav b'chol adam lo yeh ba'ol moed. So it says that nobody should be in the Ohel Moed at the time that the kohen gadol is doing the avoda on Yom Kippur. Yochel afilu ba'azara. Is it possible then that maybe you can't even be in the azara, even outside this, immediate Ohel Moed? Tamalo b'Ohel Moed, ein ela b'Ohel Moed. Period. So when you tamalo b'Ohel Moed, it says don't be in the Ohel Moed, but you're allowed to be in the azara. Ein ela b'Ohel Moed shebemidbar. Okay, but then all I know is the Ohel Moed that was in the desert. What about the beit hamikdash? What about Shiloh? Ubeis Olamim? What about the Mishkan Shiloh? What about the beit hamikdash? So how do I know about that? Minayin Talmud Omer ba'kodesh. So therefore it says, what does it say? V'chol adam lo yeh ba'ol moed b'vod l'chaper ba'kodesh. And therefore, ba'kodesh, in the holy area, that could be even in Mishkan Shiloh, could even be in the beit hamikdash as well. En ele b'shas haktorah, b'shas matan domin minayin. So all I know is that nobody should be in the Ohel Moed at the time that the kohen gadol is burning the incense in the kodesh HaKodashim. But b'shas matan domin minayin. How do we know that even when the kohen gadol is putting the blood of the par and the izim and the goat, how do I know that nobody should be in the Ohel Moed when that's happening either? And the Gemara is going to ask in a minute, where do we get the implication that it's limited to the time of the Ketores? But this is what the Gemara asks, right? So he says, all I know is that at the time of the Ketores, nobody should be in the Ohel Moed. How do I know that even at the time when the Kohen Gadol is placing the blood is sprinkling the blood of the cow and the goat, the Sari Lashem. So therefore it says when he goes in lechaper. The Gemara is also going to ask, how do we know that Ketoris is a kapara? Seder. Fine. So it says that when he goes in lechaper to atone, and therefore it's even going to be including the blood of the cow and of the goat. All I know is when he goes into the Oel Moed, when he goes in to do the avoda, nobody should be in the Oel Moed. How do I know that also when he leaves, nobody should be in the Oel Moed? Tamloma I'd say so until he leaves. So nobody should be in the Oel Moed from the time that the kohen gadol goes in to do the avoda until the time that he leaves. And then he atones for his family and for himself and for his family, uvad kol kal Yisrael, and for all of Israel. So kapara also kudemes. So the Gra actually gets rid of the kaparas based on, he goes straight to the kaparas echav kohanim, right? So he atones for himself, right? Because there's only three things in the pasuk, right? V'chibur bado, vad beso, vad kol kal Yisrael. So the Gra says actually it's right. How do we right? So kapara also kudemes the kaparas echav kohanim. So his kapara comes before the kapara of his fellow kohanim. The kaparas echav kohanim kudemes the kaparas kol kal Yisrael. Fine. And the kapara of his fellow kohanim comes before the kapara of all the rest of the Yidden. Omer mar in the ele b'shas haktar my mashma. So we had said that all I know is that nobody can be in the Oel Moed at the time that the kohen gadol is doing the avoda of the Ketoris. What do you mean all we know is that nobody can be in the Oel Moed at the time of Ketoris? Where do you see that in the pasuk? So Marava, Amar Yitzchak bar Avdim, v'chein Amar Belazar, Amar Kra v'chipar ba'ado v'ad beiso v'ad kol kal Yisrael. Well, it says that he will atone for himself and for Beiso, which we just said a minute ago is the Kohanim, uvad kol kal Yisrael, and for all the Yidden. Ezu kapar sheshava lo leveso le'echav kohanim u'chol kal Yisrael. What is the kapara that is equivalent for everybody? So again, the Gra drops over here leveso, right? So what is the kapara that is the same for him, for the Kohanim, for all of Am Yisrael? Kilu, when it comes to the cow and the goat, so that's different, right? The cow is for him and for the Kohanim. The goat is for all of Am Yisrael. But when it comes to Ketoris, the Ketoris is the same. There's no separate Ketoris for him, for the Kohanim, for Am Yisrael. It's all the same Ketoris. And therefore, when it says Bechiper Ba'adu V'Arbeis V'Ad Kol Kal Yisrael, so that's a reference to the kapara that is the same for everybody, and that is the Ketoris. Haviomer Ze'aktoris Aktoris. That is the Ketoris. Uktoris Mechaperes. But one second. Is the Ketoris Mechaper? Does it atone? Yes, the Ketoris does atone. The Atoni Reb Chananya. The Reb Chananya taught the Manu the Ketoris Mechaperes. We learned that the Ketoris is Mechaper, it atones. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, in the context of Korach, when then after Korach, lots of Yidden were dying. So Moshe tells Aharon to go and take some Ketoris and burn it, and it'll ward off the Malach HaMavis. Shenemar Vayitin es Ketoris Vayichaper Aloam. That Aharon placed the Ketoris, and he burnt some incense, and then there was atonement for the nation. So we see that incense is in atonement. V'tana d'Rabbi Shmuel, and we saw the Besmedrash of Rabbi Shmuel, Maktoris Mechaperes. What does the incense atone for? Lashon Hara. The Ketoris atones for the sin of Lashon Hara. Yavu davar shebachshai v'chaper al ma'aseh chashai. Let something that is offered in secret. I was learning with a chaver of mine, Micah Epstein, on Shavuos, and he argued that that this must be talking about the Ketoris on Yom Kippur and the Kodesh HaKodashim, that it's in the Kodesh HaKodashim, it's by himself, it's quiet, it's just him, and just like the Ketoris is offered just him, so also that atones for Lashon Hara, which is something that is said in secret. Tanan Hasam, we learned over there, portion mibeina ulam v'lamizbeach b'shas haktara. So we get out of the area bina ulam v'lamizbeach at the time of the haktara, at the time of the Ketoris. Okay, fine. Remember, right? This is the area outside of the ulam, in between the ulam and the mizbeach. So nobody should be standing in that area at the time of the burning of the incense. Now, Amr Abelazar says, Abelazar lo shanu ela b'shas haktara de heichel. Ava b'shas haktara de lefnai v'lefnim. Meheichel parshi, mibena ulam v'lamizbeach lo parshi. You hear that? Says Rabbi Lazar that when the Brisa says No, when the Mishnah says in Masechta Kelim that at the time that the Kohen Gadol is burning the incense, nobody should be bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach, says Rabbi Elazar, that is talking about the regular incense, the incense that's burned on the Mizbeach HaKtores, in the Heichel. That when the Kohen Gadol is burning the incense in the Heichel, so that certainly nobody should be in the Heichel, but they shouldn't even be bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach. However, says Rabbi Elazar, at the time that the Kohen Gadol is burning the incense in the Kodesh HaKodashim, well then it's no problem to be bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach, because it's like twice removed, right? Meaning the Kohen Gadol is in the Kodesh HaKodashim, that nobody should be in the Heichel, which is right outside the Kodesh HaKodashim, but already bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach people can be. However, at the time that the Kohen Gadol is burning the incense in the Heichel, on the Mizbeach HaKtoris, the regular incense, right? Pras Shachris, Pras Ben Arbaim. So then you can, so the regular one, nobody should be bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach. But the Ktoris being burnt in the Kodesh HaKodashim, you can be bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach. That is what Rabbi Elazar says. Mosiv Rav Ada bar Ahava asked the following kasha. V'amila K'di, some say it was I don't know who taught it. Rabbi Yossi Omer, says Rabbi Yossi in the Braisa, that just like there shouldn't be anybody between the ulam and the mizbeach at the time of burning the incense, kach portion b'shas matan par kohen Mashiach, we also stay away from bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach at the time that they sprinkle the blood of the par kohen Mashiach. What's the par kohen Mashiach? Par kohen Mashiach is if the Kohen Gadol does a sin that he has to, right? Does a sin that he thought was okay, but it turns out that it wasn't so geshmak. So he brings he has to bring a cow, and its blood is offered, inside in the heichel. As well as Parlam Davar Shel Tzibor. Parlam Davar Shel Tzibor is when the Bezdin says that something is mutter to do. So the Am Yisrael did based on the psak of Bezdin, and it turns out that actually it was not allowed to be done. So they bring a par helam davar shel tzibur. It's a special cow that also its blood is sprinkled in the heichel. And also sirei avodas kochavim. Also, if Am Yisrael, right, if Bezdin said that something was allowed and it wasn't considered avodah zarah, so everybody did a certain thing, and then it turned out it was avodah zarah, so also they bring a special sirei avodas kochavim. So just like nobody should be in the bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach at the time of the burning of the incense, also nobody should be bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach at the time that they are doing the matan damim of the par kohen Mashiach, parlam davar shel tzibur, sirei avodah zarah. Now, we don't yet know what this ketoris is, right? So when we're saying that at the time of the burning of the ketoris, nobody should be bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach, so we haven't said which ketoris. So the assumption that we're making right now is that actually it's the ketoris of lifnai v'lifnim. The ketoris that the Kohen Gadol burns in the Kodesh HaKodashim on Yom Kippur. And we're saying that nonetheless, even though it's in the Kodesh HaKodashim, still nobody should even be bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach, which would be the kasha on Rabbi Elazar, who says that the incense burned in the Kodesh HaKodashim, you're allowed to be bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach. Just that the incense burnt in the heichel, you would not be allowed to be bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach. And continues the brayso, hamamayla yesh bein ha'heichel v'bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach. And what is special about the heichel over the bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach? What makes the heichel unique on a higher level, on a higher sort of priority of holiness, that it's on a higher level than the area bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach? What's an indication of that? Because right now, all we said is that, just like you're not allowed to be, we're saying that you're not allowed to be in bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach at the time of the ketoris. So, you're not allowed to be in the heichel either. So what makes the heichel any more special than the area bein ha'ulam v'la mizbeach? Ela shebeheichel portion bein b'shas haktara uvein shelo b'shas haktara. Okay, so what we want to assume that this means right now is that what makes the heichels more special is that there can't be anybody in the heichel at the time that the Kohen Gadol is burning the incense in the Kodesh HaKodashim, as well as when the Kohen Gadol is sprinkling the blood of the par and the seir in the Kodesh HaKodashim. When any of those avodas are happening on Yom Kippur, whether it's the incense, whether it's the blood of the animals in the Kodesh HaKodashim, nobody's allowed to be in the Heichel. Whereas, at the time that the Kohen Gadol is burning the incense in the Kodesh HaKodashim, nobody's allowed to be Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach. But at the time that the Kohen Gadol is sprinkling the blood of the par and the sa'ir, you would be allowed to be Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach. And that is what makes the Heichal more special on a higher level than Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach, because nobody's allowed to be in the Heichal not only during the Ketores in the Kodesh HaKodashim, but also during the Matan Damim. Whereas Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach, you're not allowed to be during the Shas HaKtoros. However, at the time of the Matan Damim, you would be allowed to be Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach. B'Shas HaKtorah Mia Parshe, so we see that at the time of the burning of the incense, nobody is in the Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach and my love. And which incense are we talking about? B'Shas HaKtorah, the Lifnai V'Lifnim. And it must be, and we want to assume for now, that the burning of the incense that we're talking about is the burning of the incense in the Kodesh HaKodashim. And the Brisa say that at the time that the incense is being burned in the Kodesh HaKodashim, nobody's allowed to be Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach. So it's a kasha on Rabbi Elazar, who says that during the time of during the Aktoros Lifnai V'Lifnim, you would be allowed to be standing Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach, because it's kind of twice removed. You have the Kodesh HaKodashim and then the Heichal and then the Ulam V'la Mizbeach. It's just that when the Kohen God, when burning the incense in the Heichal and the Mizbach HaKtoros, then nobody would be Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach, because that would be right next door. To which the Gemara says, Lo b'shas HaKtorah de Heichal. To which Rabbi Elazar stands his ground, and he says, no, that Brisa, when it says that at the time of Aktoros, nobody is Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach, that's talking about the Aktoros in the Heichal. But the Aktoros in the Kodesh HaKodashim, Rabbi Elazar would argue, you would be allowed to stand Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach. Yochi fact the Gemara, Homa Maila V'sulo. But then the Gemara says, 1 second. We had just explained the Brisa up until now to be, right, meaning before Rabbi Elazar had said, no, the Aktoros that we're talking about is in the Heichal, we were assuming that the Ketores that we're talking about in this Brisa was in the Kodesh HaKodashim. And what the Brisa was saying was that you're not allowed to be in the Heichal. Well, let's say this. You're not allowed to be Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach at the time that the Kohen Gadol is burning the incense Lifnai V'Lifnim. To which the Gemara then had to say, well, then what makes the Heichal? I don't know what I just said. 1 second. Let me repeat that. We had wanted to say that in the Brisa, you are not allowed to be standing Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach at the time that the Kohen Gadol is burning the incense Lifnai V'Lifnim. And therefore, the Brisa said, well, if that's the case, then what makes the Heichal any more special than Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach? You're not allowed to be in the Heichal, and you're not allowed to be in Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach when the Kohen Gadol is burning the incense Lifnai V'Lifnim. So what makes the Heichal any more special? To which the Gemara then had to say, what makes it more special is that at the time that the Kohen Gadol is doing the Matan Damim, is sprinkling the blood of the cow and the goat, you're not allowed to be in the Heichal, but you would be allowed to be in the Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach. That's what makes the Heichal more strict, more special. But the Gemara says, if we're saying that the Brisa, when it says that you're not allowed to be Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach at the time of the Ketores, it's talking about the Ketores in the Heichal, the Ketores of the Mizbach HaKetores. But Rabbi Elazar would argue that at the time that the Kohen Gadol is burning the incense Lifnai V'Lifnim in the Kodesh HaKodashim, you would be allowed to stand Ben Ha'ulam V'la Mizbeach. Well, if that's the case, then the fact that you're allowed to stand bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach at the time that the kohen gadol is sprinkling the blood of the cow and the goat in the Kodesh Kodashim, the fact that you'd be allowed to stand bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach, that's not the only time that you would be allowed to stand bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach, but not in the heichal. There's also, when the kohen gadol is burning the incense, lifnai v'lifnim, you would be allowed to stand bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach. You got that? It's a shtickle. It's a little subtle. Right? Again, we had just said, we wanted to assume that the Brisa was saying that at the time the kohen gadol burns the incense, lifnai v'lifnim, you are not allowed to be standing bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach, and therefore the Brisa says that the only difference between the heichal and the ulam v'lamizbeach, the only way that the heichal is more strict than bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach is that you're not allowed to stand in the heichal at the time that the kohen gadol is sprinkling the blood of the cow and the sa'ir, but you would be allowed to stand bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach. But if you're going to say that you're allowed to stand bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach even when the kohen gadol is burning the incense lifnai v'lifnim, well then there's two instances where the heichal is more stringent than bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach. One being that you're not allowed to stand in the heichal when the kohen gadol is sprinkling the blood of the cow and the sa'ir, and you would be allowed to stand bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach. But there's also that at the time that the kohen gadol is doing the incense lifnai v'lifnim, you're not allowed to be in the heichal, but you would be allowed to be bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach, according to Rabbi Elazar. But then why does the Brisa only mention the blood, if in reality, according to Rabbi Elazar, it's additionally the incense lifnai v'lifnim, you would be allowed to be standing bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach. Right? So says the Gemara, Ihachi, if this is the case, like Rabbi Elazar is saying, that you would be allowed to stand bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach when the kohen gadol is burning the incense lifnai v'lifnim, Ihachi ma'mayla v'sulo, what, the only time that the heichal is more stringent than the bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach is when the kohen gadol is sprinkling the blood of the par and the sa'ir. Ha'ika ha'mayla. There's also this instance where the heichal is stricter than the bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach, and that the ilu me heichal parshi, that they stay out of the heichal bein b'shas haktara didei, both at the time of the kitoris as well as bein b'shas haktara didei, that nobody's standing in the heichal both when the incense is being burned in the heichal, as well as bein b'shas haktara lifnai v'lifnim, as well as when the kitoris is being burnt in the Kodesh HaKodashim. Ve'ilu mi bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach, whereas bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach lo parshe ella b'shas haktara de heichal. Whereas you only stay out of bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach at the time that the kitoris is being burned in the heichal, but you would be allowed to stand bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach at the time that the kohen gadol is burning the incense lifnai v'lifnim. But the Brisa doesn't say that. It only says that the difference is regarding the blood, not regarding the incense. The Brisa seems to be assuming that bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach and the heichal would be the same regarding the incense. So the Gemara answers that you have to understand bein b'shas haktara and bein shelo b'shas haktara slightly differently. Well, differently. We've been assuming up until now that b'shas haktara means at the time that the kohen gadol is burning the ketores in lifnai v'lifnim, whereas shelo b'shas haktara is the time that the kohen gadol is sprinkling the blood, kilu not the ketores, shelo b'shas haktara, kilu not the ketores, rather we're talking about the blood. Says the Gemara, no. B'shas haktara means at the time that the kohen gadol is burning the incense in the heichal, and shelo b'shas haktara is talking about when the kohen gadol is not burning incense in the heichal, rather the kohen gadol is burning the ketores in the Kodesh HaKodashim. And therefore, Hakatani, what the Brisa is saying, and therefore it will align with Rabbi Elazar. Remember, Rabbi Elazar says that when the kohen gadol is burning the incense in the Kodesh HaKodashim, you would be allowed to stand bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach. So Hakatani, what it's teaching is, El shebeheichal portion bein b'shas haktara that nobody's allowed in the heichal, whether it is at the time that the kohen gadol is burning the incense in the heichal, uvein shelo b'shas haktorah, or if the kohen gadol is burning incense in the kodesh HaKodashim. In both of those cases, you would not be allowed to be in the heichal. Whereas ben ulam v'la mizbeach in portion ele b'shas haktorah, you only have to stay out of ben ulam v'la mizbeach at the time that the kohen gadol is burning the incense in the heichal, but in the kodesh HaKodashim you would be allowed to stand ben ulam v'la mizbeach. Okay. But 1 second. But then that's not the only difference. But what about the difference regarding the blood? Right? We just said that that the difference between the heichal and the ben ulam v'la mizbeach is that the heichal you're not allowed to stand there both during the incense of the heichal as well as the incense of the kodesh HaKodashim, whereas ben ulam v'la mizbeach it's only during the ketores of the heichal that you're not allowed to stand there, but of the kodesh HaKodashim you would be allowed to stand. But then there's also the difference of the blood. Don't forget about the blood. That you have to stay out of the heichal both when you're putting the blood of the cow and the goat on the mizbach haketores, ben b'kedusha de lifnai v'lifnim, as well as when the blood is being placed in the kodesh HaKodashim. Whereas ben ulam v'la mizbech you're only staying away from when the blood is being put on the mizbach haketores, but the blood lifnai v'lifnim you'd be allowed to stand. Ben ulam v'la mizbech Amar Rava shem prisha achasi, says Rava eina chinami. When we say that, you're staying out of the ben ulam v'la mizbeach during the avoda of the heichal, it's referring to, yes, the avoda of the ketores as well as the avoda of the blood. It's all the same. It's all included together. Okay, so we seem to be able to uphold Rabbi Elazar's opinion, which is that when we say that you don't stand ben ulam v'la mizbeach at the time of the ketores, it's davka talking about the ketores of the heichal. But the ketores of the kodesh HaKodashim you'd be allowed to stand ben ulam v'la mizbeach. Omar Mai, we said earlier, kach portion b'shas ma'in par kohen Mashiach ufar helim davar shel tzibor usirei avodas kochavim. We said that just like you stay out of ben ulam v'la mizbeach at the time of the matan damim, of the aktar of the ketores on Yom Kippur, as well as we just said the matan damim in the heichal, that when the ketores, the matan damim is happening in the heichal, so you stay out of ben ulam v'la mizbeach, and we say that the same applies to the matan par kohen Mashiach and the par lim davar shel tzibur and the sirei avodas kochavim. You would stay out of ben ulam v'la mizbeach. Minolan, how do we know this? Omer Padas asi kapara Yom Kippurim. Says Rav Padas, we learn off from Gzeir Shava that it says by these korbanos kapara, and it also says by Yom Kippur kapara. So therefore, just like on Yom Kippur, you would stay out of the ben ulam v'la mizbeach. So too would apply to these korbanos. Omer Rav Ada bar Ahava, says Rav Ada bar Ahava, shmas mina milos deoraisa. Rav Ada bar Ahava wants to argue that we see from here that milos are deoraisa. Who can tell me what that means? Milos is referring to the levels of kedusha of the beit hamikdash. That the Har Habayis is more holy than Jerusalem, and the Chel, which is 12 amas? What was it? Right between the walls of the leading into the Azara, and then so the Chel is more holy than Har Habayis, and the Ezras Nashim is more holy than the Chel, and the Ezras Yisrael is more holy than the Ezras Nashim, and then the Ezras Kohanim, and then Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach, and the Heichal, and the Kodesh Kodashim. Each step gets holier than the next. So Rav Ada bar Ahava wants to argue that must be the oraisa. From the fact that we're making distinctions, and we're saying Davka don't be Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach, but the rest of the Heichal you would be allowed to be in, right? So when the kohen gadol is burning the incense in the heichal, so don't be ben ulam v'la mizbeach, but I could be in the Ezras Kohanim. So Rav Ada bar Ahava wants to argue the Shema Mina Milos Dorais, that these levels of kedusha must be Dorais Vachi Gemirlu and Salach L'Moshe Misina Dis Hagadaitich D'Rabbanon, because if you say that these levels of holiness are only D'Rabbanon, but Midoraisa, the entire Azara, including the Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach, is technically all the same kedusha. Well then, Ma'ishno Ben Ulam V'la Mizbeach. Well then, why Davka do I need to stay out of ben ulam v'lamizbeach, but I could be in the rest of the azara. If midoraisa, they're all the same. I should really not be able to be in any part of the azara. But the Gemara says, well, no, you could say that maybe they are derabanan, but that dilma mikru va'ayli. No, sorry. So that's all part of the same question, right? Because if you say that these levels are only derabanan, but midoraisa, it's all the same. So ben ulam v'lamizbeach. So what's special about ben ulam v'lamizbeach that stay out of this area ben ulam v'lamizbeach? Mikula azar nami nifishu. Stay out of the entire azar, because if technically speaking the entire azar is really the same level of kedusha, well, just like I'm concerned that I might go from the ben ulam v'lamizbeach into the heichal, I should be concerned that I'll go from anywhere in the azara to the heichal. So the Gemara says, no, Kevin de lo mafsik midi. I'm sorry, I think I skipped words. Ben ulam v'lamizbeach Kevin de lo mafsik midi lo minkru amilsa. That when it comes to the area ben ulam v'lamizbeach, there's literally no distinction. If you walk too far, the next thing you know, you're in the heichal, and you got to stay out of the heichal. But azara Kevin dika mizbeach achitzon de mafsik minkru amilsa. But the rest of the azara, since there is the mizbeach achitzon that is a heker, you're not going to end up in the heichal, right? Meaning, midoraisa, you really have to stay out of the heichal at the time that the kohen gadol is doing the avoda. You got to stay out of there. But the rabbis make a gezerah and they say, also stay out of ben ulam v'lamizbeach, because we don't want you to make a mistake that if you're not paying attention or whatever it might be, you might end up in the heichal, and that would be a problem. So just also stay out of ben ulam v'lamizbeach. But that doesn't apply to necessarily the ezras kohanim or the ezras Yisrael, because you got the mizbeach in the middle, and you're gonna realize, hey, I got to stay out of there and not walk past the mizbeach. So therefore, you can even say that the milos are derabanan, but even though technically the oraisa, the entire heichal is all one kedusha, but in terms of just practically speaking, being able to differentiate and distinguish between the heichal and the azara, or just to prevent a mistake of meandering into the heichal when the kohen gadol is doing his avoda, so we say stay out of ben ulam v'lamizbeach. But there's as kohanim and as Yisrael, those parts of the azara, they're less of a concern, because we're not going to, you're going to stay on that side of the mizbeach. You're not going to go past it to the other side. Amar Rava, Shma'amina kedushas ulam ve'echol chad milsei. Now Rava wants to argue that we see from here that the kedusha of the ulam and the heichal are the same. That kilu is the ulam the entryway into the heichal? Is it considered, does it have the same level of kedusha of the heichal, or does it have the same level of kedusha of the ben ulam v'lamizbeach? So Rava wants to argue that Shma'amina kedushas ulam ve'echol chad milsei, that the holiness of the ulam is on the same level as the actual heichal. Because if you want to say that the kedusha of the ulam is not the same as the kedusha of the heichal, ulam gufe gezerah, well then that would mean that staying out of the ulam is itself a gezerah. Meaning, if we say that really the heichal is where you have to stay out of, but the ulam, the entryway into the heichal, is not actually considered part of the heichal, and therefore the only reason to stay out of the ulam would be a gezerah d'Rabbanan, lest you end up going into the heichal, well then that would mean that the only reason not to go into the ulam is a gezerah. Well then, v'anam nekum v'nigzor gezerah l'gezerah, we would then make an additional gezerah and say, don't even go bin ulam v'lamizbeach, so that you don't end up going into the ulam, so that you don't end up going to the heichal. We don't make gezerahs for gezerahs. So it must mean that the ulam itself has the same level of kedusha as the heichal, and that is why we say don't even go bin ulam v'lamizbeach, so you don't end up even going into the ulam, because that is the same level as the of kedusha as the heichal. So the Gemara says, lo ulam v'vein ulam v'lamizbeach had the kedusha yi heichal v'ulam shtei kedushos. No, says the Gemara, actually the heichal, the ulam has the same level of kedusha as beina ulam v'lamizbeach, and the heichal is a separate kedusha. And we say don't go beina ulam v'lamizbeach and to the ulam itself, any of that area, lest you end up going to the heichal, which is where you don't want to end up. B'chol yom hayachosa b'shel kesef. The Mishnah now continues. We're moving on to the next piece of the Mishnah. So it says that generally, when taking the incense, the coals to be used for the incense every day in the beit hamikdash, so you would use they would use a silver shovel. But today on Yom Kippur, the kohen gadol uses a golden shovel. My time, how come in general they would use a silver shovel? And for the Gemara, Torah chasam avon sheisah, because the Torah is sensitive to the money of the Yidden, right? If the money to be spent on these klei sharis is coming from donations, so we don't just want to make everything gold and waste money. So we'll use silver, which is more durable than gold, and then transfer it to the golden kli to take into the heichal for the burning of the ketores. Vayom chosa b'shel zav v'aya machnes. But on Yom Kippur, the kohen gadol would just go straight to the gold and use the golden shovel and not the silver one. My time out come mishum chosha the kohen gadol. As we've seen a number of times, out of concern of the stamina of the kohen gadol. He's got a lot of work to do. He's not eating, so we don't want to hack him a chaynik with silver shovels and golden shovels and transferring. So we just say, just use the gold one and that's that. The Mishnah had said that in general, they would shovel out 4 kavs worth of coals and then transfer it to a shovel that holds 3 kavs, which means that 1 kav's worth would kind of fall on the ground. So we learn in a brisa that if that when the coals kind of land on the floor, so he would sweep them into the amma, into that stream that would run through the azara, and he would just sweep the coals into there. The extra kav's worth that didn't make it into the shovel, that would be brought into the heichal, and that was that. Tani chada kav v'tanidach kabai. So one second, we have one brisa that says that there was an extra kav, right, which would be in line with the rabbis in our Mishnah, who said that every day he would take 4 kavs worth of coals and transfer them to a shovel that would hold 3 kavs, which means that you'd have 1 extra kav. But we have another brisa that says that you'd have 2 extra kavs. So I understand that the brisa that says that there was 1 extra kav, that's the rabbis who said that he would shovel 4 and transfer 3 of them. So there was an extra 1. But who would be the author? Who would be the brisa who says that there were an extra 2 kav? Lo rabbanim v'lo Rabbi Yossi. It's not the rabbis who say that they started with 4 and then transferred 3 of them, which means that there was an extra 1. And it's not Rabbi Yossi who says that he would start with a saw, which is 6 kav, and transfer it to a kli that holds 3 kav, so there was an extra 3. Who would be the author of the brisa that says 2? Rav Chizda says, Rav Chizda Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Brokai. Rav Chizda says that it's Taka Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Brokai. The Tanya is within the brisa Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Brokai Omer b'shel kabayim hayamachnis. That Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Brokai says that you would Taka take in 2 kavs worth of coals. So meaning you would start with 4 kav, then transfer it to a kli that holds 2 kav, so there was an extra 2 kav. Rav Ashi Amar Filu Tema Rabbi Yossi. Rav Ashi says you can even say it was Taka Rabbi Yossi. This is what it's saying. B'chol yom hayachosa b'shel sa'a midbaris u'ma'ara l'soch shlosha kavim Yerushalmiyos. Wow. So every day he would shovel a sa'a midbaris, right? Remember that right there's 3 kinds of sa'as. There's the sa'a midbaris, the sa'a Yerushalmiyos, and the sa'a tziporis, right? Each time they added, I think, a 6th. So basically, if you would start with a sa'a, if you would shovel out a sa'a midbaris, which was basically, right, which was 6 kav midbaris, but 5 kav Yerushalmis, and then transfer it to a kli that holds 3 kav Yerushalmis, and you have an extra 2 kav Yerushalmis. Alright. Sounds good to me. So then, according to that, it would be Rabbi Yossi. In general, the shovel would be thick, but today was lighter. It would be heavier. Today was lighter. Tana, it was Tana Brisa, B'chol Yom Isa Gilda Ave V'Hayom Rach. That every day it's sort of, right, the sides of the shovel, I guess it wasn't just like a flat shovel, it also had sides to it. So the sides would be thick and heavy, but on Yom Kippur they would be soft and thinner and lighter. In general, the shovel that he would use was short, V'Hayom Aruka, but on Yom Kippur it would be longer so that he would be able to have, right, how come my time, why? So that he can have more leverage on the handle. That in general there was not like a bell on the shovel, but today there was a bell on the shovel, as the pasuk says, as Rashi says, V'nishma kolu b'vo v'gomer, that his sound would be heard when he went into the Ohel Moed. So therefore, there would be some kind of a bell, some kind of a ring on the shovel. Divrei Ben Askan, that was the words of Ben Askan. However, we'll stop it over here. That was kind of a very technical daf, right? A lot of it dealt with the shaila about where you're allowed to stand when the kohen gadol was doing the avoda. Then we saw the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, who says that when the kohen gadol was burning the incense in the Kodesh HaKodashim, so then you would be allowed to stand bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach. You would not be allowed to stand in the heichal. But when the kohen gadol when the kohen gadol was burning the incense in the heichal, you would not be allowed to be standing bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach. We had a sort of complicated shaila from a brisa that we wanted to argue, that maybe would say that even when the kohen gadol is burning the incense l'fnai v'l'fnim, you're not allowed to stand bein ulam v'lamizbeach. But we ended up defending Rabbi Elazar pretty nicely, and that seems to stand, which is that when the kohen gadol is burning the incense in the heichal, so then you would not be allowed to stand bein ulam v'lamizbeach. But when he's burning incense in the Kodesh HaKodashim, you would be allowed to be standing bein ulam v'lamizbeach. We discussed a shtickle, the different levels of kedusha of Yerushalayim and Har HaBayis. Now, as you get more inner in the beit hamikdash, they kind of go up in levels. We wanted to argue that was the oraisa, halach l'Moshe miSinai. We ended up saying that maybe you could argue that it's actually derabanan, and just we say it's specifically stayed out of bein ulam v'lamizbeach, but you could be in other parts of the azara, just because bein ulam v'lamizbeach there isn't really a very well visible divider, and it's very easy to end up getting into the heichal, whereas the rest of the azara you'll see the mizbeach and you won't go any further. Okay, and then we talked about a few kind of technical things from our Mishnah moving forward, but those were kind of the main sugyas. That was daf mem daled of Masechta Yoma. I hope you enjoyed it. Cheers.